Okay, hi guys. So if you read my Planet Wars book, you would know that I concluded that we are facing what seems to be a noetic parasite, which is infecting this planet and intending some disastrous results for us, either just through its own intention or just by a consequence of its own parasitical nature. And this is just what manifests when you're infected with a parasite. It just breaks you down and kills you as a matter of its own survival, right? So we're going to get into the structure of how this parasitical life form, noetic life form, seems to work. And of course, by noetic, I mean that it's a mental, seems to be a mental or spiritual parasite. It's like a parasite on like a different spirit level plane. You know what I mean? I know, I understand that that sounds a little bit wonky, maybe to people who are, scientists and materialists and don't have much familiarity with the occult or magic. You've never read about that, but there's, and believe me, I am, a scientist. I came from the scientific materialist world. That's how I was raised. I was first a Christian, and then I became atheist and scientific materialist, and then I discovered other material, and just there's a lot of written material out there of people's experience and of, the theoretical explanation based on the subconscious, dealing with, concepts from Carl Jung, the collective subconscious of consciousness, all explaining how this phenomenon that's been called magic. I know magic seems like it's a totally ridiculous thing, but it's actually a function of how the mind works and tricks that you can do either to trick yourself or trick reality. Because, of course, as we know, why is it that far-fetched? Because what's quantum mechanics all about these days? It's all about how amazing observation is, right? Wow, the human mind can do all these crazy things just from the act of observation. Well, extrapolate that to what if you have a consciousness level which is, increase your IQ by 50 points or 100 points or 1,000 points. What would happen then? And why wouldn't that be possible, right? So there's yet a lot more possible than what's we perceive with the senses, right? That goes all the way back to Plato, of course, in the allegory of the cave, right? Where the allegory of the cave, when you're sensing, what is, you're sensing, you're using your senses and believing your senses, the shadows on the wall, and that's all that reality is. But if you escape that cave, which is the analogy for your body and its senses, there is another world to find where the true light is, and what has always been defined as the true light, always, throughout all time, in all religion, and in all philosophy even too. The true light is the spiritual world where you make contact with your spirit, your soul, and realize that you don't have to be in the physical world, that the physical world is an illusion. You go to this higher plane of existence. So it's all well founded. So I don't want to turn anyone off by saying, oh, he's talking about um, esoteric things, right? It's all very well established. I can provide you literature references if you like. Fascinating things to read, very scientifically documented. And no, yeah, it's not going to be peer-reviewed stuff. I mean, come on. If you're following me, listening to me, obviously you're well beyond thinking that peer review is any sort of standard for truth. And obviously, if you've read my book, you know what I did and exposed about that whole operation and plot, right? So, in any case, let's talk about the nature of this enemy. So the idea then, just to review that again, a noetic parasite, it's a mental parasite that seems to we're all familiar with biological parasites, right? You can get intestinal parasites and other various kind of parasites, and they're bad, right? They're very, very bad for you, and will eventually kill you, right? They're not good. They're not symbiotic, right? A parasite is not a symbiotic thing. It just extracts from you and takes from you until you die. We'll get a little bit more into that ahead here. Versus a symbiotic relationship, for example, between say wolves and caribou, right? You could say that, well, the wolves are parasites upon the caribou because they eat the caribou, but there's actually a symbiotic relationship there where the wolves actually keep up the fitness of the caribou and remove, of all things, the parasite infected animals, right? Which have been made weak and and not fit for survival, reproduction, things like that, right? So interestingly, wolves as predators actually serve the symbiotic function of relieving the herd of parasitical infection. That's a great dialectical actually problem right there, actually, right? So if the first node of the dialectic problem here is the herd, Then the antithesis to the herd would be the parasite, and then the synthesis is the predator, which you know improves the herd and gets rid of the parasites, right? It's just kind of a interesting, just because it's three branches, so there's got to be a dialectical operation happening there. It's pretty obvious if you think about it, right? Yeah, great. Anyway, that's really fascinating. I had a great chat with somebody about that somewhere, and I forget, maybe it was on Facebook or I don't know. Anyway, let's get on with things, okay? I think I was trying to explain a noetic parasite. It is a parasite that operates on the sort of, if you want to call it the astral level or spiritual level. It's not a physical life form. I mean, just go to science fiction. Why is this all over in science fiction? There's such a thing, things that can exist, beyond the physical body. I mean, if you have a soul, that's something that can exist beyond the physical body, right? It can exist independent. This goes back to just so much of our philosophy and idealism and everything like everything like that in our whole intellectual tradition. Going back thousands of years, right? Who've talked about this stuff in various ways. Of course, I get that in modern times it's all about scientific materialism and just there's nothing beyond matter. But that's just the approach being taken. It's never been proven, right? It's just useful for making internal combustion engines work and jet airplanes work and things like that. You don't need to worry about the spiritual world. But just because we can make iPhones work doesn't mean that the spiritual world has been refuted. It's just been forgotten about, right? Okay, and maybe that's very convenient actually for a spiritual noetic parasite, right? That's actually very convenient for it if we forget about a spiritual world, but this parasite operates on a spiritual dimension, right? That's very convenient for it because now it can just extract from its host, and its host will never even think about identifying it. So the enemy is among us, and here's a little. It's just kind of a joke, aliens. Here's a little control structure diagram, which we will get into later, soon. Okay, so this presentation was a bit difficult to produce, and sometimes when I look at it, I'm like, wow, I'm kind of going all over the place, but it kind of just builds up. So just follow along with me. We're going to kind of thread in a bunch of different topics here, but it all sort of comes together. And anyway, just enjoy the discussion. Okay, so gaslighting. I just want to discuss gaslighting. I've never really used this term. I've never really thought about it much, honestly. It's only been in the last couple years where I've really realized just how important this term is, and that this is what I've been going through for the last decade on this climate stuff, is gaslighting. So what is gaslighting? Gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse that causes someone to question their own sanity, memories, or perception of reality. Oh yeah, that's been going on for sure with my interaction with the peer review system and with other scientists. Absolutely, as we're going to get into, as you probably know where I'm going to go with that. It is a covert type of emotional abuse that often occurs in abusive relationships. Oh man, yeah. If you want to be abused, if you want to find abuse, I mean, maybe it's not so bad anymore. It probably is. But man, like when this was in its heyday 10 years ago, you went online and started asking questions about, are you sure that this is the way the climate works? Yeah, there's a lot of abuse online. I mean, everyone knows that, right? The internet, I had this acquaintance at work that called the internet and forums the internet hate machine, because it's just like, that's what the internet does. It generates hate, right? That's what the internet does. It generates hate. Whatever other purpose it had in mind, I think that the end result is that it simply produces hate. That's kind of a funny way of looking at it, and you are certainly probably familiar with that if you've done online commenting and debating on climate or religion or anything else. Goodness gracious. The victim of gaslighting may feel confused, anxious, or as though they cannot trust themselves. Gaslighting is also known as coercive control and historically referred to extreme psychological manipulation to commit an individual to a psychiatric institution or cause mental illness with the intent to brainwash. Okay. In contemporary language, gaslighting is a colloquialism describing the subjective experience of having one's reality repeatedly questioned by another. Yeah, so this is what they are actually doing to everybody in climate science with this flat earth climate science stuff. That's how they operate. So for example, what did I do? You guys are familiar with this probably by now, right? The standard approach to climate science is to use a flat line for the Earth. what does a flat line for the Earth mean? That means flat Earth, right? And I simply said, you know what? Why not draw the Earth as a sphere? Because it actually makes a difference in math, right? So, and so I've been testing this out online, and so, this still goes on, the gaslighting, right? And so the first response I'll get is that they'll say, that's not a flat line, that's a sphere. And I'll be like, no, but that's literally a flat line. How can they say that's a sphere? And they're like, well, it comes from a sphere. It comes from spreading the solar input over the entire sphere of the Earth, and that's why it comes out to, the solar input divided by 4, this equation. And I'm just like, this is the entire surface area of the sphere turned into a flat plane, which is why it's drawn as a flat plane. And why are you insisting on doing it this way and drawing it as a flat plane when you can draw it just as a sphere? And it makes a difference. And what difference does it make? I mean, look at this. So their input for the flat Earth model is this little equation here, F 1 minus A over 4. That's their equation for the solar input. Now that's so interesting because if you use a sphere for the Earth, that's actually what you get for the output of the Earth. And then instead of having to use that output of the Earth as the input of the Earth, as they do on this flat plane model, you can just use the solar input as it actually is. Now think of that statement. You just use the solar input of F, because that's what solar input is, flux, the solar flux, this flux from the sun, that little symbol right there, F sun, that's what it means. F sun, just use the flux from the sun as the input. What are they doing here? They're using the flux from the sun as 1/4 the flux of the sun. So they're saying that the flux from the sun is equal to 1/4 of the flux from the sun. What a strange statement, right? Now, if you convert that to temperature, you get that this value of the input, the solar heating on the Earth in their flat Earth approach to understanding the climate in basic pedagogy. This is peer-reviewed, and it's in classrooms. So you get that the solar input is minus 18 degrees Celsius, and that the sun can only heat things to minus 18 degrees Celsius, right? Whereas if you use a spherical Earth, you just use the solar input as it actually exists, and that's a plus 121 degrees Celsius, right? So I just point out that all I'm doing is saying that if you use a sphere versus a flat plane, with a sphere, the solar input is plus 121 degrees Celsius. With a flat plane, it's minus 18 degrees Celsius. That's a difference, right? That's a real difference. And they'll just be like, no, that's not a difference. That's not a difference. And then they'll be like, and it's crazy for you to even suggest that there's a difference. Joe, it's crazy for you to even suggest that there is a difference between a flat plane and a sphere. Your spherical model is ridiculous. Why would you even do that? This is the way to do that, to do it, right? And I'm just like, okay, but why not use a sphere? So, just for an example of the gaslighting, right? So this first statement is from Eric Donovan from my old university at Calgary where I used to work. And I just tried explaining this to him, and I said, what's wrong with using a sphere versus a flat plane? Like, why wouldn't you want to teach students how to do it with a sphere? And he says to me in response, Joe, you are dangerous and ill-informed. Words cannot express my disrespect for your position regarding sphere Earth. I mean, that's massive gaslighting, right? And then, of course, Roy Spencer, saying that, oh no, that is what happens. The sunlight does go over the entire surface of the Earth. And it's like, how can you say that? There's a day and night, but that's what he says. And then he says that I'm crazy for questioning it, right? He says, this is basic geometry, and it's a starting point of all climate science. How can you question it? I'm like, I don't know. I just think that the Earth is a sphere, and there's a day side and night side. I don't think you can really say that sunlight spreads all over the whole Earth as an input, because that would mean there's no day and night. Like, what's wrong with me saying that? Well, you're an idiot for saying that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so weird. And then this was, another person just on Facebook, some professor, saying that your spherical Earth theory fits every definition of a crank theory. It's obviously absurd and violates known laws of physics. I'm like, why would it? I'm like, so you take the sphere Earth, but you unfold it to make a flat plane, and then you spread sunlight over that whole surface, which makes the solar input equal to 1/4 of the solar input. Isn't that kind of like crankish? Isn't that kind of violating physics? Like, why can't I just make it a sphere? and have a day and night side and use the solar input as it actually is. Well, Joe, that's just the most stupid thing you're, that any scientist could ever do, is their response, right? So it's gaslighting. It's just a massive amount of gaslighting, right, is what it is. So let us continue. Psychological warfare. Oh yeah, so these are just some examples. So I went then to peer review and I said, I want to see just how bad this is ingrained throughout and coordinated throughout the whole peer review system. So of course, it's in my Planet Wars, talked about it in previous videos, right? I went to a whole bunch, over a dozen, I think. It was in the end, different journals, just to say, hey, why not use a sphere for the solar input for teaching how the sun interacts with the Earth, And so you get these. So I got these crazy gaslighting responses from all over the world, right? So spherical model is quite wrong in so many ways, and it's nonsense to say that the sun creates the climate, right? Because of course, when you have plus 121 degrees Celsius input, you can say that the sun creates a climate. Why not say that? Seems reasonable. Does the sun not create the climate? But with their minus 18 C input, minus 18 degrees Celsius heating can't melt ice. It's certainly not going to cause evaporation. It's not going to create climatological phenomena that we're familiar with, right? So yeah, so the sun doesn't create the climate in their case, but in my case, just using the solar input as it is, 121 degrees Celsius, that can create the climatological phenomena. And they're just like, no, the sun, that's nonsense to say that the sun does that. Okay, and then just a few other things. Should be some solid theoretical evidence to support your proposed spherical idea was a better method. It's like, well, isn't it better to say that the sun creates the climate? Because isn't that what actually happens and exists? Isn't the sun actually warm when you go out and feel it? It's not minus 18 degrees Celsius. So no compelling evidence. So I have no evidence, apparently, that the Earth is a sphere. That's what they're saying. They're saying that you have no compelling evidence that the Earth is a sphere. And you have no justification for saying that you should make a model with the Earth being a sphere. Just keep it as a flat plane like everyone is doing it, Much more extensive underpinnings are required to say that the Earth is a sphere, let alone, oh man, that's so bad. I should know that name, the Greek fellow who, measured the radius of the Earth way back when. That's so bad that I don't have that put to memory. What a bad philosopher I am and ontological mathematician. What was the name of the Greek philosopher who measured the radius of the Earth using the shadow on the sticks? Anyway, so our journals deal with subjects that would be adequate for university level teaching. Well, that is from university level. Anyway, you guys have seen these quotes before. If not, let me just take a look at them. I believe that your approach should be first vetted by experts who could validate or invalidate. So, that's what I'm going to. I'm going to a physics journal where the experts are supposed to be. And I would expect that experts in physics and astronomy would agree that, oh yeah, the Earth is a sphere. And yeah, right, that makes some mathematical differences from treating it as a plane. But apparently they're not expert and qualified enough to say and agree with me that the Earth is a sphere, right? How odd. The arguments made for consideration of a spherical energy budget are ad hoc. So that means I'm just making it up that the Earth is a sphere and that you can show how the sunlight interacts with the Earth as a sphere, right? That's just made up. Whereas, they're using the Earth or treating the Earth as a flat plane with a 1/4 solar input. That's totally justified and has total mathematical rigor, right? But me saying that the Earth is a sphere and that you can show how the sun will interact on a sphere? No, that just has no justification. Anyway, so massive amounts of gaslighting, right? So the thing about this is, what is coordinating this phenomenon? Because it's very well coordinated. So how do you get, so this is about the operations of the enemy among us and how the enemy works, right? How do they coordinate something like this across space and time and across so many different scientists? So here's a good concept: suspension of disbelief. Suspension of disbelief. Suspension of disbelief. What do we mean by that? So this is the avoidance, possibly willing, of critical thinking and logic in understanding something that is unreal or impossible in reality. Now, I'm not talking about them, that they're in that state. I'm talking about, Well, you'll see in a second. So this is how we are able to enjoy movies and books and sci-fi, for example, right? We know that we're watching something fake. We know that the movie is fake and that the special effects are all fake, but we suspend our disbelief about it and enjoy the experience, right? This is kind of how we all live in regard to our perceived reality of existence itself, right? This is kind of like, this is Plato's allegory of the cave, right? We just, accept this reality around us, right, that we're presented with. And most of us don't really question it. We don't have a disbelief in it. We just accept that this is the real reality, like the prisoners in Plato's cave seeing the shadows on the wall. This is the real reality, and that's the extent of reality, right? But, remember the movie The Matrix, right? Ever question why any of this is supposed to exist? Is any knowledge valid at all? How do you know? How do you know any of the knowledge that you have at all is valid in any way, right? What's the point of being here? What's the point of the senses and looking around and breathing, everything, right? Why not assume that you're being lied to about everything? Most people just take for granted the existence they're presented with. But what if you take another approach and just assume that everything is a lie? Why not do that? Why not assume that everything is a lie, that you're being completely lied to, right? What do you find then? I mean, just as an exercise. Right. So for me, when scientists, I already existed in a state of, you know, well, sorry, not in a state of suspension of disbelief about reality, but I had already existed in a state of questioning my reality and not believing it anymore. You know what I mean? So my disbelief was being no longer suspended. I had active disbelief just from, things that I experienced in my life, childhood, blah, 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 things like that, right? So I was kind of in a state already where I was just kind of like bewildered by reality, right? I was getting more and more bewildered by reality with all this gaslighting. Of course, that's what gaslighting is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you question your sanity, make you question reality, right? But at the point where I can't find scientists to simply agree with me that there's a math difference and physics difference between spherical Earth and flat Earth. Now it's just like out the window. Now it's unbelievable. Like before it was kind of like, okay, I'll go along with this and believe it, even though, it all seems so absurd. Now it's just like, okay, this is obviously something is obviously messing with us, right? We're obviously being messed with. If I can't find scientists, on this topic anywhere, to simply agree that yes, the Earth is a sphere and you can do math for that, and that yes, 121 degrees Celsius, in that reality is a different number than minus 18 degrees Celsius on the flat plane, and that makes a difference in physics, that there's literally differences in physics between those two temperatures, which is obvious, to anyone. If I can't find that, then it's no longer believable. It's like there's something else going on here, right? Yeah, no longer believable. So then it's a case of figuring out what is it you're facing, right? So the enemy's modus operandi. So scientists, strangely, infinitely resistant to rational and obvious demonstrations that the radiative greenhouse effect is flawed and does not work or exist, because that all has to do with the flat Earth stuff, as I've been discussing, right? It's all based on, climate change, climate alarmism, all that. It's all based on this flat Earth science, right? But they really, really, really badly want to keep supporting it and pretending that it's legitimate, right? They just really badly want to do it. You can show it to your face, like that Eric Donovan guy from my university. I just showed it to his face. It's like, look, here's a sphere. And here's a flat plane. Don't you think it's better? And he's like, that's so ridiculous, Joe. I can't believe how much I hate you for saying that, Joe. It's just the most ridiculous thing ever, So they really, really, really badly want to keep this flat Earth science, fake greenhouse effect, non-existent greenhouse effect where the sun can't create the climate. They really want to keep it in place. They really got to protect it, right? And then policymakers in government, on the other hand, strangely infinitely resistant to alternative policy solutions, which wouldn't require solar radiation management. That means blocking out the sun, and geo and strato and bioengineering, removing carbon dioxide, sunlight from the atmosphere. They really want to do those things. They don't want to do any other things. They really want to do the geoengineering and the bioengineering. They really want to do those things. And those things involve removing carbon dioxide and sunlight, which is the basis of life on Earth, the basis of photosynthesis, which is almost all life on Earth, right? It's a very high fraction. I don't know what the fraction is. It's probably high. It's probably like 99% now, right? I suppose maybe there's bacteria that's not photosynthetic, but you're talking about all higher life, right? You're talking about plants, animals, all higher, almost all higher multicellular life, right? Has some form of dependence on photosynthesis. Anyway, removing carbon dioxide and sunlight ends photosynthesis, right? And you don't need to remove it all. You just need to remove a bit, and you can stop photosynthesis, right? And you do that, you wipe out 99% of life on Earth, right? So conclusion. The conclusion is that there seems to be a coordinated enemy which plans to end photosynthetic life on Earth. So then the problem is figuring out how this thing operates and what its nature and structure is, right? What is this enemy? Where did it come from? Who is it? And how are they, in this Earth, on the Earth, appearing as humans and working or running humans otherwise, and implementing these plans to affect this result, right? So just more about the enemy's goal, that it is actually a total extinction level event. So of course you've seen this slide before, but it's just a few articles showing that this is really what they want to do. They're making statements that they really want to not have to go through government to do solar radiation management and geoengineering, meaning blocking out the sun. They want to avoid politicization, which means they want to avoid having to go through government, and they just want to go ahead and do it. They don't want it to be an issue that's voted on. They just want whoever's in government, they're going to go ahead with these plans to block out the sun and cause this total extinction level event, right? And then so this was, some other place that's genetically engineering a bacteria that'll just eat CO2, just suck the CO2 right out of the air. So, I mean, look what happened with this recent pandemic and what seems to be possibly a lab leak, right? I mean, we've all watched movies, you understand the idea, right? What happens if you have a new designer life form that escapes the lab and is doing something extremely destructive, which is removing CO2. Of course, they're selling it as, oh no, that's awesome. It'd be so great to have a life form that automatically sucks all the CO2 out of the atmosphere. It'd be so good for the environment, right? It would stop climate change, right? Right? Guys, I mean, that's their whole spiel, right? Their whole lie. But it's like, no, you're just going to kill 99% of life on Earth is what you're going to do. Because it's photosynthesis. It's you all know what I mean, right? By photosynthesis, the grass, right? Grass, flowers, plankton in the ocean, bases of the food chain, right? No photosynthesis, no anything else except for bacteria, right? You're reduced back to the level of bacteria, basically. Excuse me. So pretty bad. They actually are planning on that. So what if we blotted out the sun? They want to blot out the sun. I mean, guys, and they're like, blotting out the sun would be great for the Earth. Blotting out the sun would be so good for the weather. Oh, it would be so good for the climate, you guys. Blotting out the sun would just be so good for life. I mean, for the environment, and it would stop climate change. It's like, it would stop climate change and stop everything. I mean, do you see how crazy their language is? Yeah, it'll stop climate change and it'll stop everything, won't it? And they're like, yeah, but we stopped climate change. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, it stopped all life on Earth. But man, we really stopped that climate change. And that was, what we really needed to do. Oh, yeah, it's a consequence, I guess, that, all life was extincted. But you know what? All life would have went extinct anyway from climate change. So we just, stopped climate change. And so now life can come back and not go extinct, even though we just extincted. Well, anyway, guys, it's all just, you can't argue it on its own terms. It's all just absurd, right? It's all just absurdity designed to end all life on Earth. And just this ridiculous statement. What was it? Here. It's the sanest option we could consider. So the most sane thing to do is to block the sun. Is to blot out. They want to build a giant solar umbrella, a giant umbrella out in space, 1 million miles away between the Earth and the sun that will block out the sun. And that's what they want to do. And okay, don't need to go over it again, but it's just, so we're facing an enemy. There's an enemy here, guys. That's an enemy because, on the one hand, it's like, well, no, they really care. But on the other hand, when it's like, okay, but it's based on flat Earth, and when you try to show them, and they have these responses, and they're unwilling to change, right, with their MO, and that's fixed in stone and unchangeable, and the end result is what it results in, well, then it's a purposeful plan, isn't it? So who would plan that? Because you should be able to talk to a scientist and be like, look, 121 degrees Celsius is different from minus 18. Look, at minus 18 degrees Celsius, water can't melt. At plus 121 degrees Celsius, water can both melt and evaporate. Don't you think that's an important difference in physics and science? No, that's the stupidest thing to say of all, right? Guys, that's not believable, right? That's not a believable response, right? It's not believable. It's not believable. So you have to stop having suspended disbelief about the behavior of these people and realize that it's not believable because it's not believable. And that means that it has a purpose and that it's intentional, right? Okay, so who is the enemy? NPCs, AIs, and forums. So this is from my book, Planet Wars, if you're familiar. So they look and are assumed to act just like real humans, but they're not. Appearance is deceiving, action and behavior is not. Use the glasses of reason to see, like the movie They Live. Put on the glasses, put on reason. Suspend the disbelief. That's what those glasses in that movie They Live did. They suspended his disbelief. You have to do that with reason, right? So suspend your disbelief. So it's not believable, or you have to stop suspending your disbelief, right? So it's not believable that scientists are defending this flat Earth theory in the way that they do. That's not believable. And it's not believable, for example, that mothers take their children to drag queen story hour. That's another example of something that's not believable. It's just not something that would happen, right? It's not something anyone would do in a normal world. It's not believable. People have it's a state of suspended disbelief because they see what just look like other people, and that, oh, I guess the people are deciding to do these things. But these things are so absurd that they're no longer believable, right? So generally anyone who follows any of the mainstream narratives, so, pro-pharmaceutical hospital and healthcare, they're all into the vaxes and the pills, and they love their diseases and talking about their diseases and their allergies, and they accept that allergies are just normal, and everyone should have lots of allergies when they're, totally created by the shots, and they just love their doctor visits. There's been so much brainwashing with all these sci-fi shows, for example, Star Trek. Who was the main character all the time? A doctor, Stargate SG-1 doctor. Like they're just always making doctors out to be these deities. And then shows like on television, ER, these doctor shows, they make these doctors out to be, miracle workers when they're not at all. They're just prescribing drugs according to a formula, doing nothing else and usually just hurting you and not actually solving any problem, right? But they've been so deified in a sense by the media. People just love to talk about going to the doctors like it's such a special thing. They're like, I went to the doctor and the doctor, told me that I have this problem and that problem and I am on 5 different medications. It's just so gross. It's just so disgusting and gross. And of course, a lot of you are likely familiar with the whole fraud of the pharmaceutical system versus the, terrain theory, natural hygiene system. So yeah, deny relevance and importance of diet, natural hygiene, academia and education professionals, scientism, climate change. I freaking love science types, right? You midwits, politicians and police who protect and support the politicians and enforce their stupid, ridiculous policies, which, just following orders while they, take away your freedoms and beat you for breathing without a mask on, right? I mean, that literally happened. People would take a mask off and get beaten by the police, right? Who were like, God, just trying to protect you as they beat the crap out of you for not wearing a mask. Supporters of democracy, supporters of democracy, big one. Democracy, anyone knows that democracy, anyone intelligent, democracy has always been identified by all philosophers and thinkers throughout all time as being the most ridiculous and stupid system of all. And yeah, people bring up that stupid Winston Churchill quote, of all the systems of government, democracy is the worst, but the only one that works. That's just it works for the parasitical class. That's all it works for. Democracy is the worst thing in the world. Anyway, voting, oh yeah, they just love voting. Voting is so retarded. Equality, equity, inclusion, multiculturalism, all horrible, toxic, destructive, anti-becoming, last man things to believe in, right? Yeah, and they love their fat and body positivity, right? Fat is the new beautiful. Like, no, there's nothing beautiful or good or healthy about fatness. It's just, I mean, that being said, a lot of people, it's not their fault. They've been poisoned, especially in the US, right? A lot of obese people, it's not their fault. They've never been educated on what and how to eat and how to treat their body, and they're being actively poisoned with, pharmaceuticals and glyphosate and things like that, and their obesity is literally out of control because their body's been so damaged. Of course, what the parasite is then doing is then they want to then promote that because fat people go to the hospital more and make the pharmaceutical industry more money. So of course they want to normalize that and say everyone should do that because it comes down to that. It just makes them more money, makes the shareholders more money. They literally come up with ways in the pharmaceutical industry to do that. How can we make our shareholders more money? And how can the CEO take home a bigger paycheck? I know we need more fat people because fat people go to the doctor way more, right? It's just that. It's so gross, right? Yeah, critical race and gender theory supporters and anti-white people. So here's the command and control structure of the enemy and how they work. Okay, so at the top, we have this force. Let's just call them Zetas is apparently their name. So they are a noetic parasite. They're a parasite that is a spiritual analog, a mental analog, or let's call it a psychological analog, right, to what we know of physical parasitical behavior, right? Some properties extremely cowardly, weak, disgusting in both physical and mental nature, just like, a parasite in your intestines is pretty disgusting. I mean, of course, the parasite itself doesn't find itself disgusting. It's just survival, right? But very cunning and smart. Parasitical survival niche is survival. I mean, that's just a consequence of, struggling to survive in an entropic world and having to, gain energy for yourself. The parasitical niche is a way to survive. And so it's filled, obviously, on the physical plane. And it also is going to have to be filled on the mental or noetic or spiritual plane. It just makes sense. There's going to have to be that type of survival, probably. I mean, it just becomes apparent. They can incarnate as humans, but they have difficulty incarnating with full physiognomy. Their ears are usually really weird. Sometimes their noses, and they have a real hard time understanding biological sex because they're not from here at all. They seem to reproduce asexually and not have sex wherever they come from. So they're really, really confused by human sexual dimorphism. The sexual by male and female, right? Importantly, though, they can exert coordinated off-world control to the below structure via collective subconscious means, right? So this is all just functioning through the subconscious, right? And, in the past we would have called this magic, but, and it still would kind of be called that, but, now we understand that it's working through the subconscious mind. There's some really interesting stuff if you've heard of Dianetics and the psychological theory of Dianetics. There's other structures in your mind that we're not aware of. Of course, we're all familiar with the idea of the subconscious mind, right? So there's aspects of our mind which we just don't have a very good understanding of yet. But if you're a very highly advanced species and at that a mental noetic parasitical species where you're going to understand the mind very, very well, and you're going to understand how to manipulate it and how to do brainwashing and hypnosis and all that sort of stuff through the subconscious, right? So you have the main control structure, main group, and then you have AIs and NPCs, so that's artificial intelligences and non-player characters. So these are apparently, we have learned, are the public leaders and influencer personalities. So these sort of set the agenda and control it. So the agenda comes from way up high, but then on Earth you have AI people and NPC people that are instituting the directives to follow. For example, they're the leaders. So they're going to be the religious leaders, political leaders, scientific leaders, entertainment, news media, military. These are very highly tuned artificial intelligences, and hence they have difficulty interacting with normal people, and that's why these people are kept away from the public, right? So there's little to no access to these AIs and NPCs. And yeah, I get that normally we call just the normies NPCs, like the sheep NPCs. But the difference is that NPCs are programmed, right? Whereas normally normies and the sheep are following the commands they're given, right? Um, but these very highly tuned AI NPCs, they have a lot of difficulty interacting with normal people and engaging in normal conversation. So that's your politicians and leaders, and that's why they have security. That's why they're not allowed to talk to the public except under very controlled conditions. Usually, especially you see that there's a pre-made set of list of questions that are given, for example. It'll be like a live interview, but the journalists that the person is going to talk to have been pre-selected, and the questions have already been given and the answers already provided, and then this AI just repeats them, and it looks very believable, right? It looks like you're talking to a real person, but it's just a script that they're following, right? So yeah, little to no access due to everyday humans, due to classic NPC behavior. From video games, you talk to an NPC, it just repeats the same line over and over again. It can't think for itself, can't extrapolate, can't have insight and understand what you're talking about, right? So, for example, take a person like Justin Trudeau or, Joe Biden or other people, right? They have security all around them, and the main purpose of that security, yeah, one, security, but really it's to not allow the public to have just a basic conversation with these people, right? Because you'd quickly find out that these people, and same with politicians or celebrities, things like that, right? It's just, they got to be separated off from the public, but with that separation comes some sort of status of untouchability and power, and then they use that then to implement their plans and their strategies and what they're programmed for, right? So then forums then are the masses, right? And so these exhibit groupthink, and they believe everything on the TV, and so these are what seem like real people, right? Believe the TV, support the agenda and the system. They're kind of like a hive mind in that way. Importantly, they have no intuition. They're the people that have no internal monologue or mind's eye. And I remember just a few years ago it came out. It was a big discovery in psychology that there's a large fraction of the population which has no internal monologue. They have no voice that they hear. They can't talk to themselves, and they also can't imagine anything. Like they can't, like, there was this one test where it was like imagining an apple. Like imagine a red apple with a stem and a little green leaf on it, and they're like they can't imagine any of it, like any of it. And so you're literally, when you find people like that, you're literally looking at a person that's not real. Like they're literally some sort of artificial construct which does not have the normal psychological operating functions that a real soul has, right? Yeah, so they support everything official because, everything official is, they're here in number. They're placed in number to create the appearance, the facade of support, right? And of course that works through democracy, right? That's perfect for democracy. That's why they love democracy. That's why this enemy system loves democracy, because they got all their people in here, all their fake people who are controlled by the AIs, and then they just follow along and vote how they're told to vote and believe and support what they're told to believe. And that's how you create this artificial support for totally ridiculous concepts like, flat earth in modern physics, right? Totally ridiculous concepts, but that's how they provide the support for it, right? So everyday people who seem quite real, but they're either infected with a parasite or they're simply artificial souls, and they're not real people at all, right? You got to imagine that after 13 billion years of existence in this universe, there's other entities which have learned perhaps how to, infiltrate the incarnation process of, how a soul unites with a zygote, right? And they've learned how to hijack that process and put in artificial basically programs into that in place of real souls, right? I know, sounds incredible, but these things are possible. So yeah, they're simply unable to reason, emotion-driven, highly programmable. They support the agenda through democracy. They're NPC-like. They repeat what they're told. They're the hopelessly inert people, the people who are hopelessly inert in the system, and they would never never be able to remove themselves from it or think anything differently than what the system tells you. And then you have real human souls. And real human souls are the target, and they're targeted for slavery. So this whole system sort of plugs down in to the scattered population of human souls, real souls, and it tries to corral and manipulate what these real human souls perceive as reality and what the Overton window is, basically, right? They want to create this Overton window. So you can think of, here's one side of the window and here's the other side, and they create this window, and that's what they want to fit everybody into. So I'll give an example of that in just a sec. So real souls, targeted for slavery, but they are independent operators, generally not aware unless you've, become, totally on suspended, totally resumed your disbelief, and, sort of woken up to all the lies, right? So they're generally in suspended disbelief, but what they're capable of is getting out of that system. So the problem is that they believe that what the forum members are doing is simply what other normal humans might do. But, once you realize how ridiculous it is, then the disbelief can turn back on, and you can just be like, wait a minute, that's totally artificial. That's not real. That's not what real people would do. Real scientists wouldn't say that flat Earth is better than spherical Earth, right? That's just not real, right? Mothers wouldn't take their children to go see drag queens, which have, a history that you could look up beforehand, even the show starts, of pedophilia and things like that. But that's what they're doing. It's just not real, right? So they are capable of spiritual awakening and unplugging from the system. But that is what this Zeta system wants to prevent, because this is an energy extraction system, right? Because you are corralling people into Overton windows and into modes of thought and behavior, which makes the real souls vulnerable, right, to energy extraction and manipulation, right? And so it's basically just a way to extract energy up this chain. So, for example, what I call the full retard pincer movement. So we can see how this is occurring in reality as an example. So you have the flat Earth at the top. So that's the main agenda coming down. And then on the one side, you have the AIs running the flat Earth for retards. And on the other side, you have the other AIs running the flat Earth for scientists. And then you have the forums supporting that. So, for example, the forum of academic scientists, they got that down pat. They got that one totally populated. The flat Earth for retards, there's not that many out there, actually. You can meet some, retarded people who literally believe in flat Earth, who are just, really dumb people, but there's actually not many of them. So anyway, they're trying to plug that system down into real human souls to corral us all into having to believe in flat Earth in one way or another. Either they do it directly because they're retarded people, or, clandestinely through this flat Earth climate science scheme, which they justify, right? So here is what it looks like as a meme. So tier 1, use your senses. There's no curvature, right? And they refer to, people on a boat. Look, there's no curvature on the ocean. You can't see the Earth curving. Use your senses. It's flat, right? And then on the other hand, tier 2, the other AIs, so this is the climate science approach, and it's, we can mathematically average sunlight over the entire Earth's surface by approximating it as a flat plane facing the sun. And look, there's math we can write for that, so it's true. And so that's their sort of pincer movement that they're trying to do. However, there's a bit of a problem for them, is that our retards are not actually that retarded. Like our true people who are uneducated, our real souls who are on the lower end of the IQ spectrum, they're not actually that stupid. They're not actually falling for it, And on the very end, or high end, rather, of the IQ spectrum, you have people like me and others who've been following me, and people who understand ontological mathematics. And yeah, we're not buying it at all. People have been, seeing through the whole climate alarm fraud. However, not everyone has identified that it's, reduces to flat Earth theory. That's what, I've done and a few others. I think I'm the only one who's really presented that and made that case and showed it and proven it. So anyway, that's their pincer movement, but it's not working, and they're really just trapping themselves and the midwits into flat Earth. So the midwits, on the one hand, to make fun of the retards that believe in flat Earth, but the midwits totally go along with mathematically averaging sunlight over the entire Earth's surface, approximating it as a flat plane facing the sun, because that's science, right? It's just the stupidest thing ever, right? So that's an example of how it's working, right? But like I said, it's actually reversed. It's coming back to bite them, or to only trap themselves. So it has become clear that the flat Earth psyop is attempting to be thrust from two ends of the IQ spectrum, from the low IQ and the high IQ, right? But it's failing because our low IQ retards, I'm just using that colloquially, just, humorously, right? Our low IQ retards aren't falling for it. Our retards are much better than that. How awesome. And our geniuses can see how pseudoscientific the flat Earth climate change psyop is. The maneuver is only capturing the midwits and has therefore put itself into its own pincer death trap, hopefully. But if the midwits control the system and simply outnumber everyone else, well, they might win anyway with their plans, because they just need to have enough support long enough from the midwits to be able to implement their policy of this geoengineering and solar engineering to blot out the sun and remove carbon dioxide and cause extinction level events. So they just need to maintain enough support from the numbers of the midwits, until they achieve their goal, and then their goal will be achieved anyway. And so it won't matter that they didn't get the true souls who are on the low IQ end, or the true souls who are on the higher IQ end, right? They just need enough midwits, I guess, for the time being, supporting this, their forum members, basically, supporting this agenda until they succeed with ending all life on Earth. All right, so that was a bit of a adventure, tying a bunch of things together. I know it might seem to sound a bit crazy, but read my Planet Wars book. I do try to give a good explanation and description of how it sort of all came together and became apparent. And then the key really that I want you to take away is just, understanding with me that it's not believable, right? It's simply not believable, right? And that's why I made that earlier meme, and I'm talking about this so much, because it's just not believable that scientists would react to me this way when I just say that you can do a sphere Earth, right? It's not believable. Their behavior is not believable. I mean, if I found one or two scientists doing that, it'd be like, okay, well, I guess that person's a bit of an idiot. But I find it universally across the system. It's integrated into the peer review system across 14 different journals, for example, journals all over the place. People at my old work at the university, and they're just saying the most. Anyway, I've been through that at all, right? It's just not believable anymore. So just join with me in understanding and comprehending how unbelievable it is. Like, put on those glasses, like that guy in the movie They Live, right? Put on your glasses, which resume your disbelief, right? Your disbelief in the system. And you'll see, but your glasses are your glasses of reason, right? Use your reason. Okay, so guys, thanks for staying on with me the whole time. So if you would support this work, that would be really awesome, guys. So here's a few links, a few places that you can help support this and maintain this, because really it seems like we're going to have to protect the Earth and defend the Earth from some extinctional parasitical force, which is here to eat us and extract all our energy or something. So yeah, if you would want to help me continue on this sort of stuff, that'd be really awesome. And of course, here are my books, if you haven't read them all yet. Really, I think my last three are the best. The first two are sort of lead in. I mean, they're all good to read if you want to understand how it all sort of developed. I'll post these slides in the description along with this video, so that you can review this and have a look at it yourself. They'll be in PDF form. And yeah, if you ever want to chat about it again soon with me, or have any questions, please feel free to comment. I'm sorry that I don't always keep up with the YouTube comments, and I don't always get back to you right away. I really appreciate everybody that does comment, though, and have things to say. That's really great, and I do eventually usually catch up. Maybe if I did a better job at responding to comments right away, that could help maintain engagement. But in any case, I really appreciate you guys watching and trying to understand along with me what's going on here and what we're facing. And I think I'll have one more video just about, I think I'll title it understanding, because I had the video previously, why is ontological climate mathematics important? So I'll do a follow-on one that's just called understanding ontological climate mathematics, just to help make the point of, what's in that first slide with all those diagrams that I'm comparing. I suppose I've done it a lot now, but I'll just, do it again. Repetition is the best way to teach, isn't it? Right? And for you guys to learn something, it's just repetition is the key to knowledge, right? Okay, great. All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later. Bye bye.